All right, guys, welcome into the Alabama postgame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Wes Sinor tonight, coming to you live, guys. Alabama just went final here at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Tide roll over Mississippi State 30-6, the final score in the Tide's homecoming game. A great crowd under the lights at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Wes, Bama gets it done against Mississippi State, bouncing back from their first loss of the season against Tennessee a week ago. First, just your overall thoughts on this game. Bama seemed pretty dominant early on.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that Mississippi State has had to play Alabama now 2 years in a row after they take a loss. So
Yeah.
the Crimson Tide, I think, kind of taking out some aggression on the Bulldogs for 2 straight years now. But if you look at the series overall, I mean, this is just straight domination from Alabama. This is their 15th straight win over Mississippi State, and I believe if my calculator did math right, the Crimson Tide have now outscored the Bulldogs 182 to 22 in just the last 5 meetings alone.
Yeah.
So, this series is not been competitive really for a while, and I think you mentioned before that we went on that Alabama was a 21-point favorite. I assumed that they would have covered that pretty easily, and really this should have been a shutout. If you look there at that final drive, Alabama or Mississippi State scored, and with as time expired, and so that 6 points is really the only thing that they were able to do, and even Nick Saban was still pretty pretty fired up on the sideline in that last drive, and you could see some of the players too were a little irritated and ticked off that they didn't get the shutout. But good for Alabama to get back into the win column, especially after losing such a tight emotional game last week at Tennessee. So just getting them back on track is good in terms of what they want to do for the rest of the season.
Definitely. In the pregame show, Mike Casgrande and I were talking about just some things that Alabama needed to do going into the bye week. The Tide entered the bye before getting back against LSU and Ole Miss, 2 road games that are going to be crucial for Bama down the stretch. And one of the biggest things, Wes, that we talked about Bama needed to do was clean up, especially when it came to penalties. And I think one of the most telling stats coming out of this game are the penalties. Just 3 on the day for a total of 20 yards, which is huge for Bama. I mean, you have to imagine that Nick Saban all week has been talking to this team about, hey, we have to clean things up. We have to play disciplined football. As you can tell, he was probably saying it right there. It looks a little frustrated. But Alabama right now currently ranked number 1 in the country coming into this weekend in terms of penalties. That's just not something that we have seen from a Nick Saban coach team. 66 total on the year, 17 or some ridiculous number last week against Tennessee. So, Wes, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this game, aside from that it was a win, a bounce back win, is that Bama seemingly played more disciplined football.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely something that has been a big talking point, just especially after last week. I think they had 17 against Tennessee last week. I was looking at the stats here as we were coming down the stretch of this game, and it was one penalty for 5 yards. I guess they picked up 2 late penalties there toward the end of the game to finish out with 3. But that's something that people have been focused on. I know a lot of fans have felt like this has just been a little less disciplined team, and that was a bit of a concern. So it's good to see Alabama have a performance like this where they really aren't making a lot of mistakes throughout the game, and really was able to put together a complete game tonight to get this win.
Definitely did. Let's talk about the offense a little bit. Bryce Young doing what Bryce Young does. Here are his stats: 21-35 for almost 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, no mistakes. And I have to just say, Wes, we've seen it before, but what an unbelievable effort from Bryce Young on that first touchdown, man. I mean, I think the ESPN broadcast had him hanging on for like 10 seconds before he delivered that ball to JoJo Earl. Just impressive to see what the magician can do in moments when he has to extend the play.
Oh yeah, I mean, then that's really what's exciting. When you get to watch Bryce Young play, when he's able to scramble out of situations like that, and he's still spins away from a few guys, and then he's directing his receiver to which way to go. Just perfect pass. I think both of his touchdown passes tonight were to wide open receivers. And so it's just crazy how, a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were wondering, how significant this injury was with his shoulder. And I guess it was the AC joint in his shoulder when he fell against Arkansas. Obviously, he was held out the following week. but and then comes back against Tennessee. But I mean, I know he's not 100%. They were saying on the broadcast how, some of the rehab that he's been having to do. I guess there's some
Yeah.
kind of machine at home that he's using. He's
Mm-hmm.
taking something to class to work on the
Lots of
shoulder.
machines. Yeah.
Yeah, but if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't, watching him play tonight, watching him throw the ball, the accuracy that he had. I mean, you
Yeah.
wouldn't, if I didn't know any better, I'd say he was perfectly healthy. So,
Yep.
just another, promising thing for this team to have their Heisman Trophy winner,
Certainly.
seemingly maybe not 100% health wise, but playing 100% skill wise, I would say.
No doubt, no doubt. And shout out to the offensive line for buying that time. You have to think about the protection that he is getting now. Leach has seemingly put a ton of pressure on the quarterback at times because there were guys that broke down in pass rush and things like that. But Bryce Young definitely getting it done today. Almost 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs stats, I had him up a second ago. Wes, you have them there. He didn't do a whole lot on the ground, but again, this is a guy who is a diverse player and did have a touchdown reception today, or excuse me, a touchdown run today, but not a ton of yards on the ground, Wes. 29 from the team total. He had 37 himself. Obviously, that number comes down a little bit when you look at the sacks and Bryce Young taking any sort of negative plays, but not a huge rushing attack by Alabama. They didn't seem to have to really get it done in that way today, however.
No, it's something that I didn't even really realize until the second half when I looked at the numbers. Like, wow, they really have not run the ball very well. First of all, they just 27 carries. It's not a ton of carries.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just weren't really getting a ton of yards on the ground. But like you said, they didn't really need to. I know Mississippi State gave Alabama a short field a couple times.
Yeah.
Some of these crazy decisions, I think, from Mike Leach to
bizarre to go for it
5 times on fourth down, including one time in the fourth quarter or in the first quarter. In some bad territory. I know he did it later in the game, and just kind of giving up a short yard or a short field to Alabama. So if you think about that and maybe Alabama they just got it done tonight without having to go on the ground very often. So I wouldn't put too much stock in or concern into the yards tonight on the ground because, again, I just don't think they really needed to do that tonight. So, but yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs 10 carries for 37 yards, and he did score a touchdown. So it's about 3.5 yards per carry for him. But I think he also had some catches out of the backfield. He had 4 catches out of the backfield for 33 yards. So, if the running backs, if Gibbs tonight wasn't necessarily getting it done with the rushing yards, he was still a weapon with his hands out of the backfield. So that's
no doubt. A couple of comments we've gotten tonight, Wes, that we were talking about this in pre-show was about Eli Ricks and the situation as to why he had not played prior to this moment because he has been, it was incredible today. I mean, shut down receivers. I mean, we're talking about a game a week ago against Tennessee when it seemed like Alabama secondary was absolutely struggling, giving up 5 touchdowns to one guy. But Eli Ricks comes in, is impressive. The LSU transfer, he's a young guy with a ton of talent. And Wes, he just flat out got it done for this Alabama defense. You have to wonder why this is the kind of, the first time he's getting a start, the first time we're seeing him.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of fans are questioning that too. That's a question that,
I'd be interested if Nick Saban answers it because I'm sure he's going to be
curious
asked.
too. I'm sure some of the reporters are going to ask him about that because, obviously the game plan worked. The defensive game plan worked. Ricks had a good game. They were able to contain Mississippi State's high-powered offense. Obviously a lot of that was through the air, with Will Rogers throwing the ball 60 times tonight. I mean, I know that's how Mike Leach's offenses are. They just really heavily rely on the pass, but he was 30 for 60 for 231 yards. I'm trying to find the defense. I don't see the defensive stats to see how Ricks did necessarily, but that's his first start of the season. I know he was a highly sought after recruit in the transfer portal for Alabama this offseason. So, I think that's good to see a change that for Alabama worked out in their favor tonight.
A change that clearly needed to happen after what we saw Tennessee was able to do in the air a week ago. So, you wonder, you're not questioning Nick Saban, you're not questioning what these coaches are doing, or at least I'm not. A lot of folks, other folks question coaches all the time. But they felt comfortable with Ricks now. Could he have gone earlier? Who knows? Was this an injury thing? Who knows? Maybe Nick Saban will provide some insight on that in his post-game press conference at Bryant-Denny Stadium here in a moment. But Alabama enters the bye week with this win, Wes. And at the end of the day, it was a pretty clean win. A lot of positives when it comes to offense and defense, special teams as well. Real record hits the 50-yard field goal. And I think that the ESPN broadcast made a good point in that this was a field goal that he made when it was 21-0. So not a ton of pressure to make that field goal, but still you'd like to see your kicker get back into a rhythm a little bit.
Sure. I mean, 3 for 3 tonight from Reichard. I know there was a little bit of concern since that Texas game. You know, he hit that game winner at Texas, which was a big kick for him. And then he had kind of struggled a little bit in recent weeks. I know Nick Saban was asked about it a couple weeks ago, and he still showed a lot of confidence in Reichard. You know, I don't think there was any question in Saban's mind about like benching him or going with somebody else.
Sure not.
And so again, yeah, like you said, not a lot of high pressure kicks for Reichard tonight. But he did go 3 for 3 with a long. I'm sorry if you're hearing these text messages coming.
It's all good. You're a popular guy.
I'm trying. Well, it's just work, you know. I got my producers in Tuscaloosa. They're texting me about stuff.
Of course.
Post game, but I'm trying to like hit the X before the full ring comes in.
It's okay. We've heard every one of them. It's all good. Yeah. You're a busy guy. No big deal. I mean, we're obviously waiting for Nick Saban, and we'll carry that press conference. So we'll hear. Hopefully, he'll comment on the Rick situation and just his thoughts going into the bye week. Alabama gets the win over Mississippi State, and now looking ahead, I mean, the road's not going to get much easier, West, because you look at an LSU team that just had a huge win over Ole Miss, and then you got Ole Miss before taking on Austin Peay and then the Iron Bowl, of course. But back-to-back huge games for Alabama. So really a week to regroup, a week to get healthy because there were some significant injuries up front for Alabama coming into this game. So this is going to be kind of a refresh week for the Tide, coming at a really, really good time.
I think so. And, you know, obviously they still control their own destiny. They win out. They can win the West, go to the SEC championship, and then you win that, you're in the playoff for sure. So, you know, the sky isn't falling yet. I know they lost to Tennessee for the first time in 15 years, and fans are upset about that. But, you know, that we've seen this before. We saw it last year. Alabama was able to recover from their loss in the regular season, still go to the SEC championship, still make the national championship. So, you know, like Nick Saban said after the Tennessee game, you know, all of their goals that they set at the beginning of the season, they're still intact. You know, everything is still within reach. They just have to control what they can control and win out. And so, you know, this LSU team or this LSU game, I think is maybe a little more interesting now that
it certainly is.
They beat Ole Miss pretty handily today.
Yes.
I don't know if you were able to see any of that game, but they were pretty much in control for the whole game. And that was surprising to me, especially after the week before, or I guess when Tennessee just like destroy LSU earlier this season?
Was that? I mean, I don't know what week it was.
Yeah, I mean, they did not look good at all. But for them to bounce back and you know, to get this win over Ole Miss was big. And obviously, Alabama also has to still play Ole Miss, so there's still, you know, some big games on Alabama's schedule. But to be at 7-1, you know, to bounce back after your loss to Tennessee, going into this bye week, I think it comes at a perfect time.
Yeah.
And again, you know, addressing some of the issues that Alabama's had recently with penalties, with Will Reichard getting back on track. Bryce Young looks healthier, you know, in each week since his injury. So I think things are still clicking, I think, for Alabama going into the bye.
Definitely a lot of intangibles, a lot of things getting cleaned up for Alabama now going into the bye week. Then it's LSU, and then it's Ole Miss. All right, guys, we know Wes has a lot of text messages to answer, so we're going to probably sign off here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Alabama Postgame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Wes Sinor, I'm Simone Eli. We will see y'all a couple weeks from now. Have a good night.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.